Greetings, shippers. Are you ready for a magical and classic ship? I know you are. This is Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy, and let's explore the pairing of Dramione, the couple consisting of Hermione Granger and Draco Malfoy. Get your wands out and get ready to show some house pride for this tale that on the surface seems very obvious, but actually has a fair bit of depth. So let's meet the players. Let's start with Hermione Granger. Fiercely intelligent, competitive, and an overachiever, Hermione is striving hard to prove herself not necessarily to anybody, but to hold herself up to her own rigorous standards. Though there are some minute hints that could be inferred that she is trying to shut anybody up who has anything to say about her parentage. She is loyal and independent, though she simultaneously longs for friendship. She doesn't need a large group, but is happy to be part of something, and will sometimes seek out causes to express her vast amounts of energy. Her romantic approach is subtle, with a tendency towards passive-aggressive jealousy, and she's not afraid to do what it takes to defend others and herself. Up next, we have Draco Malfoy. Arrogant but insecure, using his status to play into a version of himself that is expected, though it does not fully match his actual nature. Slightly fearful and unsure of who he truly wants to be, Draco would love friends, but isn't in an environment where he has many people he can truly trust. Guarded and assertive, Draco will take his anger out on others and charge into situations he has not fully analyzed. Despite this, he has the potential for compassion and thoughtfulness, as well as deep introspection. Since the books take place over a span of years, with the majority being during the emotional chaos of adolescence, these characters change over the course of the novels. Dramione is one of those pairings that can simultaneously appear very obvious or utterly impossible depending upon your point of view. On the surface, it seems to play upon the good girl falling for the bad boy, or some form of star-crossed lover's arc. He's a pureblood, she's muggle-born, how can their love be? And while there are elements of that in this pairing, there is also so much more. Draco and Hermione have an antagonistic relationship throughout pretty much the entire series, from the outset, with Draco already having informed Harry he is associating with the wrong sort, and being excessively rude to the trio, so it's no surprise Hermione doesn't have much fondness for him. And then there is the crucial moment when Draco calls Hermione a mudblood, the equivalent of a genetic slur. That moment for some is completely unforgivable, more so than an imperious curse. So why do people ship these two? Well, for one reason, chemistry. Yes, chemistry. Draco and Hermione don't get along, that much is obvious, but there is a peevishness to their interactions that can be read as the beginning of romantic chemistry. If you go for that whole, oh, boys and girls who like each other antagonize each other as a way to work through their feelings. Draco doesn't know what to make of Hermione. She is muggle-born, something he has been brought up to despise, but she defies stereotypes and is competent and capable, and not afraid to stand up to him in any way. The two share some sharp dialogue throughout the series, and it paints the picture of a relationship that could be filled with some pretty witty banter. And the sequence where she punches him in book 3 ignited many a shipper into channeling that passion in a more romantic direction. Where some people see a violent punch, other people see unexpressed passion. Hermione is a fascinating character, and the appeal she has for other characters can be a bit simpler to pinpoint. But what could she see in Draco? Well, for those willing to read into Draco's characterization, there is a lot to play with, a hidden Draco as it were, just as there is a hidden Hermione. Since for the most part the narrator of the novels is Harry himself, most relevant information is imparted through him from his viewpoint. Hence the characters act how he perceives that they do in relation to him, but doesn't necessarily make him correct, or is his information always reliable. While it may, this idea of Harry as unreliable gives fanfic authors tons of room to maneuver and explore, which may be why this universe's fandom is so large. There is so much set up, yet so little is explored. It gives fans a lot of room to fill the empty space with their own narratives, as well as for official canon works to expand upon what is already there. One theory is that Hermione has a great capacity for being able to see injustice, and has a decent emotional read on people even if she is not always the best at expressing it, and some feel she would be able to see through Draco's sneering veneer to the true person underneath. A lot of the fics surrounding this focus around the idea of them being suddenly paired together for a project, or alone together over the holidays, or somehow both isolated from their standard friend groups and coming to learn more about each other. This pairing also works better if the reader doesn't have a particular affinity for Harry or Ron, which honestly with some of the writing is not that difficult. Harry can be a bit of a brat and Ron can be pretty oblivious, and Hermione consistently comes across as more mature than both of them. So the idea of her branching off is not an impossible one, which leads to a popular element of not just this Harry Potter pairing, but many others: the oft unexplored theme of complete change. In Rowling's world, the friends of youth are often the friends of life, but many have different experiences, with changes of former rivals or enemies to friends, or falling outs that are 100% permanent. Many people never see the people they went to school with ever again. Aside from exploring that maturing element, there's also the fun of the clandestine romance, meeting in secret, cross-house romance, the shock of others when they find out. One part of the appeal of this pairing is the idea of the two not only as intellectual equals, though your mileage may vary on that point, but of Hermione coming to realize the bias of the teachers and slant towards Harry, particularly in Book 6 Potions class, which could be quite difficult for someone who applies themselves as hard as Hermione to accept. And for those crying, well, isn't Malfoy just the product of pure blood bias? Hogwarts is pretty devoid of that. And if you're in Slytherin, good luck achieving anything. I mean, all Slytherins to the dungeon, am I right? For those who like these two, they imagine they would make a good team and have several complementary elements to their personalities and could have their own fair share of adventures, with Hermione's bravery bolstering some of Draco's cowardice, forcing himself in a way to step up or challenge himself. Some of this would stem from him not wanting to appear lesser than her, but eventually the two coming to know each other as equals. And part of the fun of not knowing everything about them is that the author is free to decide what some of those common interests might be. Both of these characters also share a distance from their families, though for very different reasons. Hermione's, while supportive, can never be a full part of the wizarding world, and the Malfoys and their prejudice find themselves similarly isolated. Both are acquainted with loneliness, even while surrounded by people, and in having to live up to expectations. The idea of Malfoy falling for Hermione and absolutely hating the idea is another fun one to play with, fighting his feelings all the way, while she also has to fight hers, both kind of trapped in their own social circles. Part of the fun of Dramione is that you also get to explore the elements that surround it. While it can of course exist in a bubble, part of what makes Dramione unique is that you kind of have to address how other people would react to it, which allows you to play with a lot of the characterizations of other, well, characters, as well as world elements. So those are some reasons for, but what are some against? Well, in order for this to work, the characters, or at least one of them, needs to change. Dark Hermione is an interesting idea for those who do not just place her in Slytherin or Ravenclaw, and with a slight tweak of circumstances, you can place her there. And this tends to get a much better reception than the what has come to be known as Draco in leather pants trope. What is Draco in leather pants? Well, it's a trope that is defined as when a fandom takes a villainous or controversial character and downplays their evil qualities in order to make them appear more desirable. People tend to dislike this for a few reasons. One, they feel it muzzles the character, making them less interesting and less of a menace, and hence less narratively important. Others feel is a representation of the fetishization of villains, which some people equate with fangirls specifically having bad or dangerous taste, which they then transfer into them applying it to their actual lives, which, while it may be true for some, is a pretty big stretch to apply to everybody. This trope relies upon the idea that the participant is actively ignoring villainous traits in order to make the character more appealing, because they find their abrasive personalities or attractive physical appearance appealing, overriding all of their villainous actions. However, if one genuinely feels that the character has unexplored heroic potential, or is being maligned by the narrative itself, fanfiction can be a way to attempt to either explore that element, or get justice for the character. And in the case of Draco, with Harry Potter's author Rowling herself expressing her distaste for Draco and for those who enjoy him as a character, well, it's no wonder he has so many staunch defenders. Though for some, a good Draco will always be wearing leather pants. For some, this pairing can simply never be. For them, flirting does not entail any form of malicious interaction or saucy wordplay that mocks one's forced transfiguration or ugly gene-themed slurs. For some, that type of romantic development is just a cliche or presenting even negative or problematic expectations for young people as to what a relationship should look like. Many think that Hermione can do better, and that Draco is simply too indoctrinated by his family's beliefs to see her as anything more than other or enemy. And with the cursed child continuing the canon of Ron and Hermione and, well, poor Draco and his constantly dead no matter what timeline wife, spoiler alert, Dramione, for some, is dead, but canon has rarely stopped a determined shipper, and there are some real Harry Potter epilogue deniers out there. Those who rebel against the idea that your high school girlfriend or boyfriend is your future partner, and that the job you wanted in high school will be your job. There are many post-Book 7 fics dealing with disillusionment and reforming the world and their views. Hermione and Draco meeting years later when they were both different people has its appeal. A career-driven Granger meeting an ex-Death Eater Malfoy and coming to know each other in a way they never could at Hogwarts. It's an intriguing idea. And for the more shallow out there, which, let's be honest, we've all had our moments, they look good together. Emma Watson and Tom Felton both settled into the characters well, and their on-screen chemistry is great, particularly in the behind-the-scenes footage of the fourth movie, which led to many a great, scandalous fic of the two of them secretly dancing at the Yule Ball. The thing with Dramione and much other Harry Potter fanfiction is that if you can imagine it, it most likely exists. For example, who says Draco can't join the trio? Make it a quartet. What about those AUs where Harry is also in Slytherin? How does that play out? The possibilities are nearly endless and have been explored from a variety of angles, which again is why some people are or were so disappointed with The Cursed Child, since they had already seen many of these elements more competently developed years ago in their favorite online hotspots. As for how these two would get along, well, that's really up to the author's discretion. While elements of their character are defined, and one can imagine that it would start off a little bumpy, there's a lot left unknown, which means how this relationship develops is really up to the author, and that gives them a lot of freedom, which can be very appealing. How they would interact also varies from year to year, which again, depending on your favorite book or time period, that places you with an entirely different type of Dramione fic. Because of this, there's really a lot to explore. Dramione is a staple of the Harry Potter fandom, very beloved by some and an irritant for others, large enough with a dedicated enough fan base to have its own fan pages and fic archives. Of course, there are always other pairings. Drarry fans, for example, are pretty steadfast, and Dramione can take a hike. And there are those who love the slow burn and realization of Ron and Hermione. One of the great things about the world of Harry Potter is that it's vast, and there is room for all of these pairings to coincide. There is so much of every pairing that while some may be indeed very rare, you can find pretty much anything. So people tend to be a little less butthurt about their pairings. But only a little. What are your guys' favorite Dramione tropes or stories? Share the wealth down below. And if you don't ship it, what Harry Potter pairings do you go for, if any? This is Shipper's Guide to the Galaxy. Thanks so much for watching. Check out social media to stay up to date, and as always, stay tuned, for there are as many ships out there as there are stars in the sky.